One of the things I do is I ensure that there's a process, a space, if you want to call it a space, for thinking about the challenges and opportunities that the firm faces and bringing those people together so that we can craft a response. So that's kind of how it works. So I'm, in many senses, a facilitator of that thinking as opposed to leading that thinking or being responsible for coming up with all the ideas.
Welcome to Professionally Challenged, war stories from leaders driving change in law firms. Your hosts are Rob Patterson of Parkins Lane Consulting Group and Paul Evans of Toro Digital.
Today's guest is Pierre D'Angelo, the Chief Strategy Officer of Allens Linklaters. Allens Linklaters are one of Australia and Asia's oldest and largest law firms. Established in 1822 by George Allen, the firm now has 130 partners and over 500 lawyers. In Australia, the firm has offices in Brisbane, Melbourne, Sydney and Perth, and in the Asian region, its offices include Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh City and Port Moresby. Allens is part of an international alliance with the Linklaters Group, and the Linklaters Group is a network of 40 offices in 28 countries globally. Pierre commenced his career as a lawyer with Allens, and in 2001 he became the group manager for the business development and client care team. From there he became responsible for the firm's pricing, and in 2018 was appointed the Chief Strategy Officer. Please note that these views are Pierre's only, and they are not the views of the firm. So Pierre, what does the role of the Chief Strategy Officer entail?
I think it probably varies from firm to firm, but what it entails for me, at least, is focus on three things here at the firm. I still look after the firm's pricing function. I look after the firm's strategy function, and I also I head up the commercial management group, which works with the business units or practice streams to help them with the financial strategy and their financial management. On the strategy side of things, that involves a few things really. One part of it is managing what you broadly call strategy projects that are cross-functional across the firm. So often there are projects that just don't fit in one of the functional groupings in the firm and involve many, and so it's often useful to have somebody to coordinate that across the firm. So that's one part of what I do. The other part of what I do is I work with the firms in a very broad sense, leadership group, all those partners in leadership positions, to help them develop strategy for the firm, and perhaps more importantly, to then help them drive the implementation of that strategy.
It's an important role. I think there's the road to hell's paved with brilliant strategies that have never been implemented. So,
I think that's actually I think it's actually a great quote and insight. And actually, implementation is a major challenge in any professional services firm, simply because there are actually lots of reasons, but one of them is simply because people are so busy. And so they're so busy on servicing and meeting clients' needs today that it's often difficult to set aside enough time or space to think about the future and to do those things today that are going to make a difference in the future.
Yeah, very, very true. All right. So, and I quite like the role. If you ever leave and give me a yell.
I will.
Wouldn't mind it. How do you achieve the buy-in of strategy by the partnership?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. Look, the reality of it is that's not my role. The reality is that's the role of the partners that are in leadership positions, or the people that are in leadership positions. Each of them, part of their role is to get the buy-in and engagement of the groups that they lead. But one of the things I do is I ensure that there's a process, a space, if you want to call it a space, for thinking about the challenges and opportunities that the firm faces and bringing those people together so that we can craft a response. So that's kind of how it works. So I'm, in many senses, a facilitator of that thinking as opposed to leading that thinking or being responsible for coming up with all the ideas.
Yeah. Okay. Is it the internal challenges or the external, market that
Look, it
You're
can
concerned about
be both,
yeah.
but it's usually almost always part of what I try and do, and is be responsive to external opportunities and threats, if you want to call them that, and that then involves internal challenges in terms of reshaping how you do things, but it's usually in response to perceived external opportunities.
Okay, it's great. I love that as a concept, creating that space. As you were saying before, I think very often in professional services firms, they don't allow themselves that space to consider and go over strategy. So I think as a concept, that's a really good idea. That maybe COOs could adopt. Nice segue in terms of the external forces. One of my favourite tools is Porter's 5 Forces, and being in a larger firm, you would have a particular line of sight over some of those challenges that are facing people in the industry. So in looking at some of the key elements of Porter's 5 Forces, say, for example, the bargaining power of suppliers, what are you seeing in that space?
That's a great question. I think definitely one of the things that we are seeing and have seen over recent years, which is a new thing for the Australian market, is much greater mobility of partners. There are people who keep score on these things, but the number of partners moving from one firm to another has increased, and that's very much the case for the US market as well. And I think obviously that started there earlier, and that presents a real challenge for all firms, because it means if you want to attract and retain the best talent, then you've got to maintain a compelling value proposition as a firm to attract and retain those people.
Yeah. Are you finding that, like with technology the way it is, you can dial up a server, dial up software and start up your own boutique firm tomorrow if you really wanted. Do you find that in the larger firms that's where the mobility is, or is it between the firms?
It's mostly mostly between firms and from firms to clients, rather than necessarily people going out and starting up their own enterprises. I mean, it's possible, and you occasionally get that, but the majority of people would be going laterally to between firms or between firms and clients.
Okay. What about new entrants? There's some large ones in particular that I think might be wading their way into your patch.
Yeah, that's the one that everyone writes about as well. The legal media is very interested in all of that, and much has been written about the accounting firms and the challenge that they present for law firms, and everyone has a bit of a different view on what may happen there. I think, look, they're obviously very strong brands, and I think there's a sort of an assumption that goes with them that somehow that scale and the breadth of services that they possess somehow is going to give them a sort of an advantage and some sort of lead to some sort of an inevitable success. Look, I just think you can't necessarily make that assumption. I think within that assumption there's work to be done. They have to effectively leverage those attributes in order to break into the market. Now, I've no doubt that they'll find segments of the market in which they'll succeed, but whether, to what extent and in which areas remains to be seen. I think conflict is going to continue to be an issue.
Yeah, I got to agree. I'm probably the oldest person in the room, and remember when, the last time all the large accounting firms set up their own law firms internally, and that was a huge issue.
Yeah, and they had a particular issue there around, I think it was around consulting versus audit side of things, and that's different now, but you still have other conflict issues that come up, and that's already a very concentrated industry, both within Australia and globally. So that will present its own challenges, I think.
Yeah, I think so too.
I'm just kind of curious, where are they recruiting from? Like, are they...
I think they're mostly recruiting from law firms, and they're they're trying to take some of those laterals. What they've got to do though then is bind them together into a group that works cohesively and collaboratively to deliver a great client experience.
Like a startup law firm would have to do.
With and
bigger resources behind them.
that's easy to say.
Yeah.
Running around with a checkbook, you can do that. But then actually holding that group for 5 and 10 years to build something special and to build deep client relationships, it's quite another thing.
Absolutely.
It takes a while.
Yeah. Yeah, it will be interesting. And just sort of harking back again sort of the conflict, if you've got a corporate advisory arm of PwC, then I'm presuming you can't be doing the DD on the prospectus,
Yeah, well, I don't know, but it's certainly a question that you'd have to ask and answer, isn't it? So,
interesting.
And the breadth of services just multiplies those possibilities out many times over.
Absolutely. What about NewLaw? Have they shot or fired a shot across the bow of larger firms at all?
Look, I think again much has been written about them, and I think the personal view, I think the threat's probably been overplayed. That's without diminishing them in any way. I think it's a question of what space are you playing in and what competencies are you leveraging to get advantage. And some of the new law entrants are really good at leveraging technology and process, particularly on work that lends itself to those things, or more routine work, more work that's more predictable and there's more of a flow to it. So there's definitely a space in the market at which new law entrants can thrive. Some of those new law, and some will do just that. Others will perhaps want to move up the value chain, but every time they want to move into a new space, there are incumbents in that space that will fight back and will compete, and the capabilities that they need to break into that space are different. And so I don't think you can just assume it's an inevitable march. I think there's every battle, and you've got to watch how every battle plays out. So I'm not as pessimistic though, because I think one of the things actually that, just generally speaking, whether it was foreign firms coming to Australia, the Big Four, new law, I think one of the things that all of the new entrants have done is they've actually spurred on the incumbent law firms. And if you look at a lot of incumbent law firms today, I think they're very different to what they were 10 years ago. And I think they've evolved and become much more competitive. So I don't think things have stood still quite in the same way that some of the consultants and media might like to say when they're voicing their opinions.
Yeah. Look, and having had a little bit of experience in that space myself, I think the other thing too is as they move up the value chain, they then start to almost take on some of the attributes that, some of the overheads and some of the systems and infrastructure that they don't have, and so it gives them a cost advantage or a speed advantage. All of a sudden they have to start taking those on, and then they start almost looking like the people they're competing with. It's quite interesting.
Well, that's right. I mean, in order to be, and it's challenging to talk about this in abstract, but in order to be successful in a particular space in the market, you need to have certain competencies and systems and processes and structure. And as they move into those spaces and seek to compete with the incumbents have probably over time optimised those systems, and so they'll gravitate to looking more and more like those people.
Correct. Yeah. So it's quite an interesting space. Okay, so that's new entrants. The other side of that, in terms of Porter's Five Forces, is the threat of substitutes. What are you seeing in that space?
A lot is there's a lot of commentary on the growth of in-house counsel, and I think that's a really interesting story in the sense that the metrics show that it's probably the fastest growing segment of the legal market. And if you were a writer, this is what I'd be writing about, because it's where the growth has really been. And I think everyone has different views. Some older practitioners have seen this as a bit of a cycle, in-house getting bigger and smaller. And look, I think overall, though, the in-house teams will continue to grow where it makes sense to do so. And the other thing we've seen is they're becoming more sophisticated over time. But I don't think that's the end of external firms, because I think what it means for external firms is they've got to be much clearer about what needs they're meeting and what value they're adding, and excel in those areas. And there are spaces in which external firms can excel, which are harder for in-house teams to excel in. So, for example, an external firm can bring the experience of doing a particular kind of transaction across many sectors and many clients. And I actually think that rather than see them necessarily as competitors, see them more as complementary. One of the things we're seeing certainly in our best, and one of the things we're seeing as sort of best practice is the effective melding or moulding or coming together of internal and external resources, so that you bring the strengths of the in-house team together with the strengths of the external team to bear on whatever challenge the client's facing and create real value that way. Yeah. And that's, to me, I think the future, or one of the great challenges in the future, and a place where we can create a lot of value.
Yeah, it is interesting. I'd never heard of this term until yesterday, but someone was telling me about CLOC, which is
what is it? The Chief Legal Operations Group.
Yeah.
Very, very well established in the US and relatively new in Australia.
Yeah, and it seems that a lot of their focus is around that, and it seems that also some of the larger firms are collaborating around things like technology as well.
Well, I think we're probably going slightly off piece, but I think that I think it's actually a good development. I think one of the responses to the more for less challenge that clients have faced, i.e. doing more with the same resources or less resources, is to try and negotiate better deals, better pricing, which is completely understandable. That will only take you so far, though.
Yes.
And that led to procurement becoming involved in the buying relationship as another player, another actor. What is happening now is that is becoming more sophisticated, and the advent of legal operations is trying to create more win-win solution and more value, and bringing a degree of sophistication to that, not only the procurement process but also then the management of those resources once they've been procured. So I can see that, provided you've got the scale to be able to afford that sort of a resource, I can see that the value that might add.
It's good. So like legal project management and this type
of thing? It's all those things. So, and I think what they actually do might depend a little bit on the client, but certainly on the procurement of it, making sure that selecting the right firms for the right jobs, and that then those jobs are staffed in the right way. So but then also, and this is the bit where traditional procurement would then leave the paddock then, whereas the operations people, as I understand in the US, will tend to, if there's a large deal or transaction or litigation, they'll keep an overview to make sure that the thing's running well. Okay. And that the budgets are, the budgeting's properly being done, the resources are being properly used, there's no waste, it's being delivered as was contracted and described, all that sort of stuff. So it's an ongoing management of the resource role rather than just the buying of it up the front.
So are these lawyers that are...
Some are ex-lawyers, some are ex-BD people. I think there's at least half a dozen in Australia now.
Okay.
And I've met a few of them. They're very, very accomplished people, usually with deep legal industry expertise, and providing a real... If you're an organisation with a large spend, providing real value in terms of making sure that you're getting value from that spend.
Yeah, and the right firm, the right people. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Something that I think you're probably well versed in is the bargaining power of buyers, particularly in your pricing role. How's that going? Is it you often hear about the downward fee pressure, and everybody talks about it. It's sort of become an urban myth. Is that what you're seeing?
Oh, look, at one level, absolutely. So at one level, with I don't know how far back you have to go, but there was a time when procurement were not involved in the purchase of legal services, and now they almost always are. So, and that's part part of their function, I mean, it's broader than just pricing, but part of their function is to try and drive a tough bargain. And that's fine, because that's understandable. I think one of the things that our clients face is more regulation and the need for greater productivity within themselves, and the legal function is not immune from that. So it's quite natural that they would seek a contribution from their external providers to that. But the and or the but is that, you know, having struck your bargain when it comes to pricing, it's only one lever, and it's probably, you could argue, not the most important lever. You know, I've sort of alluded to it already. I mean, it's how your lawyers then combine with the client and the client's resources to deliver the outcome that really makes a difference, and the selection of the right people to do the job. And, you know, if you get those things right, the cost, I won't say it'll take care of itself, but the value created is such that the cost is in perspective. And so just managing price, i.e. the rate, is actually, to me, you're actually not managing what really matters.
Which is the outcome.
Which is the outcome, and getting a better outcome for the organisation.
Totally agree. I think that, that's often lost in that whole equation, particularly around pricing, is the outcome.
And I think the other side, it's a two-sided story. It's also incumbent upon lawyers, I think, or any professional firm, to help the client understand, if you want to be paid a greater rate or greater price, help them understand why that's justified.
Yes.
What are the reasons why? The terrible analogy, but why buy the Merc instead of the Holden? If safety matters to you, then maybe you buy the Merc. I don't know. I'm not trying to be disparaging to anybody here, but there are features and benefits attracted to every offer, and it's, if you have a particular offer, it's incumbent on you to communicate them and to find clients who value them. And I think we need to get a little bit more sophisticated at that as well.
Look, the greater use of alternative fee arrangements, again, it seems to be one of those things that, value billing has been out there forever, and I'm not, I think it seems to be honoured in the breach rather than the observance. Retainers, et cetera, What's your view on the alternative fee arrangements that are actually being used in practice?
Look, there is definitely steady growth in the use of alternative fee arrangements, and it depends on how you define them, because different people define them differently. But if you allow cap fees and fixed fees based on that have been built up on an hourly rate basis to fall within the definition of alternative, then they're growing strongly, because there's a great swing towards, one of the most valued attributes of pricing that clients are looking for is certainty and predictability over cost. And so it can, that can be delivered on an hourly rates basis with really effective budgeting and good communication. But it can also be delivered by agreeing a fixed price where that's possible as well. So, and so we're definitely seeing, a steady growth in the use of fixed pricing and cap pricing where the scope allows that to happen. What hasn't happened though is again the much hyped end of the billable hour. And again, I'm probably a little bit contrarian on this, but certainly the billable hour is alive and kicking and doing really well. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Sometimes there's work that actually is hard to scope. Sometimes you have to get to work really quickly, and you can't spend 2 weeks crafting an alternative fee structure. All sorts of reasons why people will revert to hourly rates. Sometimes the trust between client and the organisation is good and high, and they know that they're going to get a fair outcome operating on that basis. There's a minimal, I think the economists call transaction costs in that, in putting in place that arrangement, and so it works well where you've got that transparency and that trust. So there'll always be room for hourly rates, in my view, and that'll always be part of the mix. But sort of tackling the whole value billing sort of movement just at another level, and again, it's a view that not everyone would subscribe to. I would say that even in hourly billing, value billing is still present, because not all firms charge the same hourly rate.
No.
So implicit in a firm that charges higher hourly rates is the idea that they're going to deliver more value for each hour.
Yes.
Now, and ideally you want people to live up to that promise, but that's why clients will shop, will go to different firms with different kinds of problems, because the value delivered is commensurate to the hourly rate.
Is that sort of price value perception or price quality perception?
Is there. So in my mind, value billing doesn't equal use of alternative fee arrangements. It equals matching the value delivered to the price paid.
Yeah.
In my mind.
Heidi Gardner drew the professional services firm's attention to the benefits of fostering collaboration between practice groups and law firm. It struck me that collaboration is particularly effective in a larger firm environment where you do have, pockets of skills and really detailed niche areas of knowledge. Have you seen examples of collaboration working to the benefit of both the firm and the client?
Almost every day. I think collaboration is just, you call it different things, teamwork, collaboration, working together, but it's really important, and it's the bringing together of people, people with different attributes, different skills, different perspectives,
yes,
to create a great solution for clients that's fit for the purpose that it's required. I think that, as you've pointed out, particularly in larger firms where there's been a drive towards specialisation,
yes,
the ability to combine those specialists to create a solution is actually a core competency and is actually something that can differentiate firms, and certainly the firm I'm in does it really, really well. So I think collaboration is absolutely a key to driving value, but it's not only collaboration within the firm, it's also collaboration with the client and working with the in-house legal, working with the executives, and how you do that. That's really important, and joint problem solving with your client and trying to create value that way is really a real key. The other thing I'd say in terms of like a tangible example is you see it a lot in the innovation space. So, and it's a particularly interesting one for law firms because, if you think about where a situation where you do identify a client need or problem to be solved, and that client need, does lend itself to the application of process and technology to bring down costs and make it more efficient. All of a sudden, sitting around that table to create that solution, you still need the lawyer with the legal input, but you also need the guy with the IT or the lady with the IT perspectives.
Yes.
Apologies there, and you need you may need some process experts. You'll need a project manager to knit it all together. You might need a pricing person at the table to work out how on earth you're going to charge for that innovation and capture some of the value that you create. So all of a sudden, the successful launch of any legal tech product is actually of necessity an effective collaboration between 3, 4, 5 disciplines, and that's a big change. And so collaboration, in my mind, is growing in its importance.
Yeah. It's kind of exciting, I think, in a way, in that I think of how law firms once tended to behave, which was sort of that black box mentality where, give it to us, we'll solve it, and we'll give it back. It's a real move away from that. To almost being sort of embedded in a client in a way.
Look, I think what's happened is the ways of certainly the best of us. We've become more flexible in the ways of working. Yeah. So there are circumstances in which a client might want just a black box approach. Like, I don't have time to engage very much on this. I just need you to solve it. You run with it. Just come to me when there's key decisions to be made. Thank you very much. That's okay. That's fine. That's one way of dealing with an issue. But there are also some problems that are actually really complex and where you just need the client experts as well as your own experts around the table kicking the idea around, and you need collaboration in order to solve it. So, one of the key things I think to understand is what's the nature of the problem you're trying to solve, and then what's the most effective way of tackling it. Yeah. And I think there's probably more flexibility in the delivery model now than there's ever been before.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Do you think there'll be, non-lawyers going to these meetings that are part of a law firm now? Like, do you think that's...
It's already happening.
It's already happening.
It's already happening.
Okay.
It's already happening. So I obviously have to speak a little from experience, but I've seen, well, there are people who are technology experts who drive AI type engines over documents to save clients money by not having to review such a large proportion of them.
Sort of stuff.
Due diligence type of stuff. Any number of... So there's a lot of actual cross-functional service delivery that's going on already, and that just of necessity involves more people coming to the table and being client facing.
Cool. And that's, again, it's probably a nice segue into innovation or creating an innovative culture. Innovation's a bit like sex. Everybody claims to be doing it, doing lots of it, but few very, very genuinely are. What's your experience around innovation?
Look, I think there's a hell of a lot. I mean, look, firstly, just to concede that, the negative perhaps, there's a lot of innovation by press release. Yes. So, someone goes out, has a meeting with someone, they have an idea about something and they put a press release out.
Or a social media post.
Yeah, or a social media post or whatever, and you just get the impression that everyone's just doing all this stuff and it's all amazing and it's all really easy.
Yeah.
I think it's overblown at the moment. It's a little hot. But I think that it's becoming more mainstream now. It's a part of what we do. I think all of the larger firms in one way or another are seeking to address the challenge of innovating, the challenge of bringing the new technologies that have become available into practice and putting them into practice in a way that's beneficial. And I mean, I can only see a little across the top tier, I suppose, is my best vista. And I can see genuine effort in there at trying to innovate, not only with the use of technology, but also in the nature of the services that are provided to clients. We've seen firms move into different adjacencies, and so I don't think it's one dimensional. I think actually it's gaining momentum, and I think it's something that firms are going to get better at as they become more and more competent at doing these things.
In terms of innovation, as you were saying earlier, some of the difficulty around implementing things in any law firm is just having, lawyers are focused on doing chargeable work and getting their time and space. So I note some of the larger firms now do have specific innovation roles, including your own.
Yes, and look, and there's a balance to be struck there. So we're all learning how to best organise these resources, and people are experimenting, I think, with different structures. But I think you need some dedicated resources because otherwise it gets crowded out by other things. But you also need the partnership with the lawyers that are front of house and are dealing with client problems every day, and who are spotting and seeing the problems that need to be solved. So it's getting that balance right, which I think is one of the drivers of whether this is going to succeed or not. But I think it's definitely a factor.
Cool. Okay, just on technology, many large and international law firms are making huge investments in technology. In most instances, it's being used to create new and bespoke service offerings. I know Allens have got a real estate due diligence app. Hall & Wilcox, I know, have an insurance claims triaging app. So it seems like there is a focus around that. You and I are both on the ALMG committee, and about 2 years ago, we had Professor Karim Lakini from Harvard present on creating new industry platforms. And at the time, I was sort of really excited about it. I thought, how does this relate to law firms? But it strikes me that firms aren't adopting his sort of suggested wholesale approach to almost restructuring themselves. By and large, they're retaining traditional structures, still largely employing lawyers and utilising technology to sort of create add-ons rather than revolutionising the way law is delivered. Am I being a little bit harsh?
Look, I think maybe it's more a little bit about the perspective you're coming from. The perspective that certainly that I come out when I look at it is not the degree to which you're adopting these new innovative structures, etc. But the real question for me is, what are the problems we're solving for clients? And Are we providing, the best solutions for those problems? And I think that the existing, I think that with the change that's been happening in the existing law firms, they've, to a very significant extent, been evolving to meet those needs. Now, obviously, there's always going to be a bit of a gap and a bit of chasing the puck, or trying to move with where the market's going. And so there'll always be people saying, "Oh no, they should do more," and that's probably fair. But I would argue that to a very significant extent, there's been a lot of change that's been happening in the legal industry and in law firms, and as a result, we're still delivering, in most cases, great services that are fit for purpose. And if you look at the industry benchmarking type stuff that goes around on client satisfaction, there's one study that benchmarks satisfaction across 4 or 5 different professional services industry, and the highest scores are still in law. By a significant margin. So that's not to say there's any room for complacency. You've got to keep evolving, and I think the speed of change has been accelerating. But I don't think we're missing. I don't think that there's a need for a wholesale revolution in the short term. I think it's consistent, meaningful, and thoughtful evolution.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's interesting because people throw up examples like Uber or Airbnb, and but that's discrete areas, and I think perhaps the false assumption is that therefore technology is going to sweep through everything and change it. But if people are by and largely happy with what they're receiving, perhaps where it might change is more at the bottom end. I wonder, there's a statistic that sort of 85% of legal needs aren't being met by law firms.
I think that's right. I think, and I don't want to say it's all about them, not about us, because clearly we have to play our part. But I do think that in the B2C world, there is a real cost issue and a real affordability issue, and as a result, people aren't receiving or obtaining legal assistance where they might need it and might benefit from it. And I think there is great scope for some of those legal platforms to help people. And so I actually, I do think that I saw one app a while ago which was help me challenge my parking fine, and you can see that's that could help a lot of people. A lot of parking fines issued every day. So I think at that B2C level, that we could see some very significant businesses actually develop over time.
Yeah, agreed. I hope so.
I was just thinking on the Airbnb, the Uber, they're quite commoditised products, really. Accommodation.
That's right.
A taxi. They're
that's
compared to the brain surgery of law,
and they've managed to do some clever things. So in both the case of Uber and Airbnb, they've managed to get access to and get rents from the use of other people's assets.
Yes.
That's the whole thing.
And I'm sure if there was a similar play that opportunity in law, that someone would have invented it, but it doesn't quite work the same way.
No, it doesn't.
As I can tell.
No.
There's certainly there's certainly examples of lots of new things being tried. So it'd be really interesting to see how things develop over time.
Yeah, okay. Cool. All right, you're a pretty deep thinker. How do you stay abreast of current developments? What are you doing around thought leadership to make sure that you're across where things are?
Oh, look, I would say it's a real challenge. The demands of just everyday working can make it really hard to keep abreast of stuff, and there's so much stuff being produced and written that it's almost an impossible task. But you do a few things. One of the things I do probably like a lot of people, I subscribe to the McKinsey and the Harvard and the Sloan newsletters, but I try to make a bit of a discipline and practice of reading those, particularly the ones that seem most relevant. I do spend time with really smart people like Joel Borowski and Colin Jasper and others who have got deep experience talking about what they see in the market.
Yes.
That's a great way to get your head across material quickly. And and when I can, I also go to conferences and talk to people who are facing the same problems, and to see what their perspectives are. But it is absolutely a constant challenge.
Yeah. Agreed. Okay. What's the number one strategy book you would recommend for professionals?
Well, that's a big question. There's a lot of strategy books. Look, I can't say I've read them all, so it wouldn't be fair to say, there's a best one. But there's two that I've read in the last couple of years that I've found personally really useful. One is called Dual Transformation by Scott Anthony and some other authors, and the reason that's an interesting book is it's about how an incumbent can also become very, very innovative and trying to run the two.
Yep.
Two in parallel, because there's a school of thought that says it can't be done, and there's a school of thought that says it can, but there are some conditions that need to be met, and that's really quite interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I actually saw Scott Anthony talk once, and
seriously impressive.
Yeah, very impressive.
Seriously impressive. And then the other book that I use a lot because it's just such a simple model and so easy to use is the Playing to Win book by Laffey, which is just a great way to come up with a strategic plan for any group. What's your aspiration? Where do you want to play? How do you want to win? What capabilities do you need to win? You just sort of this cascading set of questions that are all interlinked around which you can build a strategy. And I've found that really useful.
Well, thank you for being very generous with your time today, Pierre. We've really enjoyed it. What we'd like to do is just hit you with some closing questions just to get to know you a little bit better. If someone knew you really well, what is the one thing they would know about you that others would not?
I think one thing would be that I love Barossa Reds, but can't stand Sauv Blanc.
I think we're all in headed agreement in this room. Very good. Can you nominate another legal industry leader that you hold in great respect, that you think we should approach to help us with our podcast?
Look, there are a lot of people here that I work with that I hold in great respect, but if I'm thinking sort of outside the firm, two of my mentors over the years have been Joel Borowski and Colin Jasper, real veterans of the industry and really know their stuff. Always interesting to have a chat to.
Brilliant. I'll definitely have a chat with them both. If you could lead, we might change this, if you could lead any organisation in the world, except for Allen's, what would that be?
Oh, look, I think there's no doubt it would be absolutely fascinating to be a leader in one of the global firms.
Yeah.
Because just having to deal with all the challenges we deal with, but then multiplying that out by country after country after country
Yes.
and all the different cultural norms and laws and all the rest of it would just make it, the complexity would be amazing. Yeah. But I actually also think in many respects I'm quite happy doing what I'm doing because I think Australian firms are as well led as any in the world, and I think that I think you could find that if you set up shop in London, you'd be dealing with very similar issues to what we're dealing with here in Sydney.
Yeah, just a bit colder.
Just a little bit cooler, yes.
As I said, thank you again. It's been brilliant. If people want to connect with you, what's the best way to connect with you?
LinkedIn is the best.
LinkedIn.
Yeah, definitely LinkedIn.
Tremendous. Pierre,
Thanks,
Paul,
Pierre.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for talking.
Thank you for listening to Professionally Challenged. Visit our website at www.professionallychallenged.com and please leave us a review on iTunes. Until next time, bye for now.